Good afternoon to the whole world. This is going to be episode 16, guys, of my story. And I'll be carrying on where I left off on the previous one when I mentioned that my father was going to the court of law. He mentioned that when he gets there, he's going to shoot everyone, including the police, in the court. And after the court, he then reconciled with my mother. And then he was telling us that there's a possibility that we may go back and stay with our mother. We were excited and we got back home. We stayed, not for too long, until my mother was ready to give birth to my younger sister. I think she was admitted a couple of days before she actually gave birth. I think 4 days. My grandmother was going there almost on a daily basis. I just don't know if in that particular 4 days, maybe she gave birth on the second day, and then maybe she just had to remain in the hospital or so. But she remained there for a couple of days, I know. And it was the time that the phones were very, very rare. And my father had a phone because he had a big Nokia that he managed to buy himself when he was working with his friends. They had a small project to crush the stones. They used to sell the stones, the crushed stones, pebbles, for the purpose of creating concrete. We used to call them concrete stones. They are like crushed stones. He bought himself a phone with a long antenna. It was a very funny looking phone. And at that particular time, we got a call from the hospital. My granny insisted that the doctors or the nurses call the number to inform my father that my mother just gave birth. Take note, my granny is in the hospital. My mother is in the hospital. I'm left with my father and my younger brother. And I think it was the three of us. In the household, my uncle used to have his own room with his wife and his son. But I'm not touching base a lot on them because my uncle would go to work in the week and then come back maybe the second weekend. So I don't want to touch base on them because there's nothing interesting that said. So my father received a call. It was on the 20th of January 1999. And he was informed that my mother just gave birth to a beautiful young girl, baby girl. My father was very excited. I was also very excited inside, because you must just note that when my mother and my granny were away, I was the firstborn and I had to do all the house chores, even though I was young. So I was not so excited for the fact that I'm at home. I was just excited for the fact that my mother gave birth to a young girl and we didn't have a baby girl at home. So it was when my granny called, I was sitting next to my father, I think, and then she just mentioned to my father that yo hoyo ngwana o naka and una liraka, and remember asking my father what is liraka, and then she had some sort of I don't know, meat here on the neck, and it was all fun until my mother came back. I've never seen my father so excited to have a baby girl in the household. And guys, it was a very pleasing week. We spent the whole week or 2 or 3 without having any issues. The focus was just on the new baby. And we were not allowed to touch her often as much as we would like to touch her. But what can we do? We were young. Okay, fine, time flew. And then at that particular time, I think I was almost ready to go to the high school. Before I could be registered at the high school, an argument arose now. My father says, my son is to go to a particular school. My mother said, no, he cannot go there because of the following reasons. My mother made mention, and they were all spitting facts. All the reasons were valid. My father said he cannot go to this school because the education level is low. They don't care. There's no rules and regulations. I want him to go to a proper school. That's my father. My mother said, no, you cannot go to a proper school because you cannot afford to buy him uniform, number one. You cannot afford to give him money to eat at school, number two. Number three, we don't have proper food at home for him to enjoy with his friends during the break time. And then number four, it's too far. If he doesn't have food, he cannot walk back home and come eat. But if he goes to this school nearby, he will then be able to do what? To come back home during lunchtime and eat and just rush back to school. And then they were all spitting facts. And it turned into like a physical fight. As you may have realized on each and every episode that I'm recording, I'm also always mentioning that there has been a fight. And the solution to any fight, according to my father, was this. So, one night, middle of the night, my sister is very young, maybe 6-8 months, I can't remember exactly. My mother starts crying. Middle of the night. Now my father's doing the usual to my mother. My mother started crying, and then eventually, I was young, but I was starting to become matured. I felt like stepping out of the house where we've been sleeping to go and see what exactly is happening, but I couldn't. Remember, my father had, and my father was stronger than me. So I remained in the house. I couldn't sleep anymore. My stomach was were doing things because I'm afraid for my mother now. It's been long since we witnessed such things. And then eventually my mother escaped the room. She ran, and then she was quiet. So guess what? My sister starts crying. My father gets back to the house. And then eventually my sister keeps quiet. And then in the morning, before I could go to school, I was still at the primary level. They were now preparing me to go to the secondary level, high school level. I'm going to the bathroom, to the toilet. The toilet is at the corner of the yard, very far, about 100 meters away. So I'm walking there. We had a pig kraal next to the toilet. I look beside the pig kraal. There's something there. I go there. My mother is laying down there. I called the neighbors. They came to pick her up. Took her straight to the hospital, leaving the child behind. She was unconscious. She got there. She was admitted. I think she went straight to ICU. And then now, my granny had to be stuck in between, whether she must spend time at the hospital or spend time with my younger sister. But now my father doesn't really want my granny to be responsible or to take care of my younger sister. He wants to be the one responsible. And then during the course of the day, because my mother was admitted that period, I think, for like 3 weeks. My sister doesn't have any food. We do have food because my granny would buy food, but my sister didn't have food. She cannot eat the normal staple food. She needed milk. We cannot afford to buy milk. And then over and above that, my father would just go to my granny and start to threaten my granny. Maybe before my granny goes to the hospital, he will threaten my granny to ask for money. If my granny gives money, my father will take the money. Instead of buying milk for the baby, he will go to the tavern. He will go drink. He will leave us with our sister. We had to feed her water with sugar, sometimes water with milk, with salt, not milk. We had to feed her whatever that we could. My granny would make a very, very soft porridge for us to just like scoop a bit of spoons and for her to eat and keep quiet. And then we had to learn to change the nappies. We had to learn to do everything. So there was this gentleman. He was a teacher at a school that my mother wanted me to go to. And let me just disclose the name of the school here. The name of the school was Chara. That's where I got my education. That's where I went to my high school. It used to be from grade 8, standard 6 by then, until grade 10, which was standard 8 by then, and then you had to find another school. But my mother's hope was that by the time I do grade 10 and I'm supposed to exit that school to go to another one, I'll be matured enough to take care of myself. I would be grown enough to do things on my own. So there was this gentleman there. He was a teacher, such a lovely soul. He was a father to two gentlemen that are now my very close friend, and his name was Mr. Matamela. He used to live in the area, and he heard of the incident, and he just kept his eye on me, and then until my mother came out of the hospital. And then he made a plan to meet with my mother to discuss every possibility, because what happened then was that when my mother was away, hospitalized, my father had to tear my mother's ID into pieces. I think he used a scissor to cut it, because just there by the pig's kraal, I found the bits and pieces of my mother's ID. The reason for my father to do that was for my mother not to be able to register me at a particular school. But that gentleman, Mr. Matamela, when my mother was discharged, because I gave my mother the bits and pieces of her ID book, Mr. Matamela came. He was a very strong man in the community, and then he came when my father was away. He said to my mother, I heard of what happened and of your intentions as well. And my mother said yes. And then he said, okay, fine, I can help you with that. The gentleman managed to register me at the school using his details, as in like he was my guardian. And that's how I managed to be admitted at the school. When my father spoke, that gentleman came with the whole community. They were called members of civic in our area. So they are the leaders in the community. They take care of all issues that needs group resolutions. And then they managed to sit my father down to tell him he cannot because of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I got an admission at the school. And then my sister was also growing. And in the following year, I think I started my grade 8, which was standard 6 at that school, with the help of the great Mr. Matamela. May his soul rest in peace. And I'm gonna leave you here, guys, on this episode. See you on the next one.